So this is my review for Alucarda, 1977. So Alucarda is a Mexican horror film, though not in the typical, bloody slasher context of horror. It's based deep in religion and and fears from the Catholic perspective. In some ways, while watching this movie, I felt like Peter Steele was proven right with his song, Angry, Neurotic Catholics. Angry, Neurotic Catholics. Not that I thought Peter was really wrong with that song either, but this movie kind of proves that song right too. So, the actual setting and time period to the movie isn't formally announced. It's just sort of something that we as a viewer have to piece together. I'm not sure if we're supposed to assume the movie takes place in Mexico or Europe or wherever. Though, admittedly, the exact location isn't that important. The movie starts out in some sort of crypt where a woman has just given birth to a baby girl. Initially I thought it was like an old woman, but some sort of hag slash, I think it's old man, vagabond, is in this crypt room with Alucarda's mother. And so Alucarda's mom swears to the old person to take the baby to the convent so he won't let him take her away. Now, who he is not revealed to us. But looking back after watching the film, it's pretty clear that she meant the devil. After watching the film, I also noticed that the crypt is initially some sort of kind of beautiful oasis at first. And it's not until the baby is taken away that it turns into this cobwebbed, filled crypt of doom. Alucarda's mother is played by the same actress that plays Alucarda, Tina Romero. Thinking about it, though, I assume that the man who takes Alucarda away is the devil himself. The movie then flashes forward to where we see a girl named Justine being moved into a convent. Justine was recently orphaned after what appears to be her mother's death, but it seems that she might have already experienced her father's death before that. Either way, Justine is moved into a room with none other than Alucarda. Alucarda appears out of the shadows, quickly reveals herself to be a kooky lesbian, with some interesting secrets like bugs and trinkets. Alucarda and Justine quickly get close and they frolic in the meadow, rolling around in the grass. I'm unsure if Justine, and I know how this sounds with me saying this, but I'm unsure if Justine realizes the gayness of this because it's never really discussed. They come across this freakish looking male in the forest who looks like a cross between a meth head and honestly Mungo Jerry. Once again, Mungo Jerry shit. They follow him to a caravan, and a woman reads Justine's palm, somehow being able to tell only darkness and shadows. The way her palm is read is so laughable because that's not how palm reading really works. And literally what happens is that this lady, she just put my hand in the fucking film. She just looks at it. Oh, darkness and shadows. Okay, thanks. How fucking useful is that? But what's important about this scene is that Alucarda, she gets a dagger from the weird dude, and this becomes important later. So the two girls run away from this area, and they stumble across the old crypt that Alucarda just so happens to have been born in. And so Alucarda feels right at home, and she seems to do some sort of past life recall where she was killed in the crypt. I'm unsure if potentially this was her remembering her mother, but if so, would that imply that Alucarda was her mother in a previous life? You know, this isn't ever addressed. But Alucarda here in the crypt confesses her feelings for Justine, which felt crazy to me because in the movie they just met. Alucarda wants to form a pact with Justine that they love each other, that they'll love each other and die together. They nearly complete the pact, like Alucard is about to fucking do it, you know, but Justine chickens out, you know, justifiably so, you know. I mean, we just met. We can't start doing the crazy lesbian shit yet. Let's just do the normal lesbian shit, okay? Come on, you know, calm down, shit. But anyway, Alucarda just so happens to open the tomb to her mother's grave, and all these crazy voices seep out with the girls running out of the crypt. It's not explained if this is what makes Alucarda become evil, or if Alucarda was always evil, you know? But they quickly enter a relationship after this, and the passage of time isn't really discussed. What appears to be a day to the viewer later on is revealed to be like a week later in the movie. So I would say that is something that negatively, you know, detracts. Certain things, it's like, damn, they just met. Now they're like ready to fucking... Anyway, so later during a sermon, Justine falls out and she's taken back to her room. Alucarda claims to hear the voices and starts shouting out various names for the devil, Beelzebub, Astaroth, Belial. She does this crazy, like, twirling thing around and screaming, Satan! And Justine starts crying, like, Alucarda, stop! Stop! Alucarda, oh my God! And somehow, none of the sisters in the convent seem to come in the room or even hear what the fuck is going on, you know. But what's interesting in this scene is that Alucarda seems to be falling into her descent with the devil. Though, on the other hand, in a non-religious way, this could also be interpreted as her having, like, mental health issues. Because she believes that she's being possessed by the devil. For the sake of the film, I think we're supposed to suspend our disbelief and believe that Alucarda is possessed. Right after, she slaps the shit out of Justine and tells her that they have to make a pact together with their blood. And of course, the devil shows up. And I think how this happens is actually quite perfect because Alucarda says this and the background is like black. And as soon as she says, you know, we have to make a pact, you know, the devil shows up in the darkness. And it turns out to be the man from earlier that gave Alucarda the dagger. So it's parts like this that, you know, certain cuts, the way angles are shot in the film that I really enjoyed, that I really liked. That to me makes this a good film. I don't want to be gross with this, but I'll put it this way. I don't know why, considering Alucarda's kind of freakiness and damn near instant attraction to Justine, why they had to cut each other for their blood instead of waiting for something else. And I'm not trying to be weird, but as a woman, I mean, that's just something I thought about. They naturally have blood, so why didn't they wait for that? Anyway, the two women complete the blood pact, naked, of course. This being from 1977, nobody has heard of a fucking razor. I'll just put it that way. And Alucarda starts kissing on Justine. And overall, they're just being real gay and satanic, you know. Typical shit you find in college, really. You know, who the fuck else is making out and sucking on titties in college? Fucking not me. But anyway, they go towards a witch's Sabbath. Well, wait, before I go towards the witch's Sabbath, though, I will point out that the actress that plays Justine kind of, like, really shows how good she is with, like, her freak out faces. Like, she could really make, like, you know, like, scared faces, and she starts screaming. So I do have to say Justine's actress was very, very good, in that regard. And I do think it sucks because after this, Justine's character doesn't get very many lines after this scene. But right after this is when they go towards what's a witch's Sabbath. This is never actually said, but if you know what it is, it's clearly a witch's Sabbath. But there's obviously a group of naked people dancing around and fornicating. And on the flip side, like in the convent, like split to this at the same time. One of the sisters seems to see this in, I guess, like a psychic vision, and she starts praying for Justine. So the two girls are seen with Satan during the Sabbath, and I suppose this cements their allegiance with Satan. At the end of the scene, the convent sister is nearly like completely covered in blood and seems to ascend in the light. I don't completely understand this, but I found this interesting, and this completes part 1 of the film. Part 2 of the film starts with another religious lesson, and Alucarda is caught like chatting into the ear of Justine. When asked what the sister was just lecturing about, Alucarda perverts it to Satan, which, of course, scares everyone because they're fucking Catholic. Justine joins with Alucarda, and they deliver the iconic line saying, Satan, 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 our Lord and Master, I acknowledge thee as my God and Prince. I promise to serve and obey thee as long as I shall live. I renounce the other God and all the saints. This was very interesting to me because I didn't anticipate coming across this line. I'm a fan of this band called Ritual Killer, and on their first album, they have a song called Dead River Intervention. Dead River Intervention. At the end of the song, there are a few rips played after the music ends. Now, there's obviously something from another film at the end of this song, but I can't seem to place it from where it's from. If it's from another movie, obviously I haven't seen that movie yet. But it seems to be rather popular because whatever this first part where it's like an old man chanting is used in another black metal band's song, and that clip is like content ID'd or whatever on YouTube. But that song, I don't know. So I don't know where that first part comes from, but after that, you hear this line from Alucarda. And to me, this is such a great Easter egg, and watching this movie makes me like that song more, and listening to that song makes me love this movie more. So I figured that quote came from somewhere, but I didn't know where, So I had the hunch it was from a movie, and I'm really glad to have just accidentally found out that it was from Alucarda. So this, I have it right here too. Is that? Yeah, that's Ritual Killer's first album. And wait, right there. And that's where you see, they have a reference to Alucarda on this record, the CD. It's a CD. Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was really cool. And just what a cool reference to find, like, naturally. Like, oh my God, I listened to music from a band that references this movie. That's funny. I just thought that was really funny. So, anyway, Alucarda and Justine's allegiance with Satan doesn't go over well with the convent, who would have thought, and they're expected to repent. Justine mysteriously falls ill, and from there we start to see her fade out of the movie as a character. After basically I think literally she pledges allegiance to Satan, Justine doesn't have any more lines in the film, which I think kind of probably sucks for the actress, because at this point afterwards, she's nearly just like acting, like her facial expressions and shit like that. I don't believe she has any more lines after this. But anyway, Alucarda is expected to repent at confession. And of course, instead, she points out some of the justified hypocrisies actually within the church and Catholicism. But then, of course, she shows that she's not sorry at all, actually. And here we start to see that Alucarda is definitely fucking evil. She is evil. What's interesting is that the movie moves from being like initially about this like freaky, witchy lesbian to something more major. Father Lazaro and the other convent sister start flagellating themselves to rid themselves of the devil and his evil, which I was like, damn, that's some like fucking old-timey religious shit. Like, they're kind of like getting more into the religious part here. And we see this divide actually a little bit. The movie isn't that long, but we start to see this divide between like religious superstition and what's supposed to be science. Now, when going back a little bit, when Alucarda opens up her mother's tomb, it's revealed that, they're 15 years old. So the time frame here is about 1865. So this is a time period of, some science, definitely. Right before this scene, we see that Justine is still sick in bed. And I mean the flagellating scene, not the crypt opening scene. But right before we see, the religious people fucking beating themselves, we see Justine is still sick, and she was having like these coals or something placed on her body to help with the illness. Now, of course, in 2026, like, you can easily point out that, okay, whatever the scientist doctor is doing is also fake. Like, that's not shit that works. But in comparison to the religious stuff, that was the closest thing he had to shit that fucking worked, basically. It was akin, I don't know what you would call it off the top of my head, but what the doctor was doing to Justine was something along the lines of like bloodletting or, things like that doctors of yore would do, which obviously didn't help anything. Ironically, the doctor's treatments didn't help Justine, though, because they were pseudoscience. They didn't help Justine because she was possessed. What's also interesting is that Father Lazaro brings up instances of the devil from archives in the Vatican. And this was I know I keep saying interesting, but this was really, really interesting to me, actually, because growing up, my very Catholic father would talk about how the Vatican had extensive pieces of knowledge, and I'll just leave it at that. I wonder if that part of the film is a nod towards that Catholic mindset. I'm not sure if maybe that's just something like devout Catholics really know or believe. Like the Vatican, like this idea, like the Vatican has like all this information that people don't know, at least from a religious way, and I'll just leave it at that. But so a brother to the monastery convent thing holds up this book from the Vatican archives where two other like quick recounts of demonic possession or evil are recounted, and then a third one is read, which seems to foreshadow some of the later events of the movie. Sort of, but not completely. An exorcism is then to be performed on Justine and Alucarda in a way that I've never seen depicted in any other movie, at least before watching this, where the two are practically crucified, Justine being worked on first. They poke her with with something, some needles or whatever, and she bleeds, which I guess apparently kills her. The doctor that looked after her earlier busts into the room and he starts flipping his shit because he's like, what the fuck are y'all doing? Y'all are some crazy ass religionauts, basically. And he starts saying how like the religious stuff they're doing has no bearing on science and medicine, let alone whatever the fuck they're doing to Justine, you know? And so not knowing the, I'll say, spiritual aspect to this, he takes pity on Alucarda, who was knocked out by one of the brothers. Like, one of the brothers of the monastery, like, literally fucking punches Alucarda in the jaw. And the doctor takes her away from the convent and back to his own home. Justine is then mourned by, I assume, the sister that first welcomed her to the convent. And it seems clear that they only kind of saw Justine as like a plaything for Alucarda. They see Justine as innocent and Alucarda as the, you know, the perpetrator. We see two sisters end up praying over Justine's dead body, but not in the Coma V movie kind of way. And strangely, one of the sisters falls out and is taken away. But last minute, Justine moves her hand, symbolizing that she's like come back to life, right? So back at the doctor's house, Alucarda wakes up, freaking out that she's going to be killed. And the doctor's blind daughter, Daniela, stays in the room with Alucarda after her father leaves. And near immediately after the doctor leaves the room, Alucarda starts to put the moves on Daniela. And when I saw this, I thought, oh my God, Alucarda is such a player. Like, can you stop hitting on women for one fucking moment? Shit. God. In another room, though, we see the doctor who, like, opens up a book about Satan, but he, like, rejects it. He's like, this is bullshit. And see, he's then called back to the convent, where it turns out that Justine's body is gone. And, of course, initially, he's like, somebody probably just moved her body or stole her body. But then he's called to look at a nun's body just upstairs that has mysteriously burned to death. Alucarda is seen leaving the doctor's house with his daughter, Daniela, though we don't know where to. Back at the convent, we see Father Lazzaro ask to see the burned nun's body, and a second later, he is seen chopping the head off of it because she came back to life. This is by far the most brutal scene in the film to me. One of the few scenes with blood and gore, if not like really, well, there is blood in another scene, but this is the most bloody, goriest scene in my opinion. Because we don't see blood in much else of the film, this scene seems even more gory to me. What's interesting is how the doctor asks how her body could have moved if she was dead. And the father tells him it's because of the devil. The devil moved her limbs. For the sake of the film, of course, it makes sense. But it also makes me think about how, you know, in real life, many people have used religion as an excuse to do horrible things, you know. But like I said, for the sake of the film, we suspend our disbelief and we're supposed to believe, you know, it's the devil. Like, you know, the devil really is literally doing this, you know. The doctor then sort of goes on a little bit of a diatribe, talking about how when he studied in Paris, religion was taught as a form of slavery, which actually is probably based in a little bit of truth, because when I was in school, I had French class, and I distinctly remember the teachers I had said that French culture is not as religious as American culture, at least. So, you know, a lot of people don't like get married in a church over in France the way people do in America. Anyway, so the doctor was saying, though, he couldn't believe, though, like with religion being taught as a form of slavery, that a nun could come back to life, you know. And it seemed to me that the movie was playing with the idea of, this divide of people who believe in science and medicine only, and then, of course, people that believe in religion only. Father Lazzaro states that Justine is the person that corrupted the nun, and they have to stop her and Alucarda. I guess you would think that potentially Justine burned the nun's body then. But it doesn't really matter. The movie's old enough for me to say this. It's not really a spoiler for me to say this. Where it's like, later on, we see that Alucarda has the ability to just burn people by looking at them and then saying various names of what's supposed to be the devil. She'll say, Beelzebub, Belial, Astaroth, and then people will be set on fire. But when this nun's body is set on fire or found burnt, Alucarda is still at the doctor's house. So I guess technically Justine must have had this power too, right? Small things like that aren't really talked about. So from there, the doctor is set to find Justine, to stop her. And he's taken to the crypt that Alucarda was born in because one of the sisters of the convent just so happened to know that this is where Alucarda would hang out sometimes. And so, I don't know where he goes. The doctor disappears off screen, and the nun goes up to this tomb and takes, lifts up the lid, and it turns out Justine's body is in there, naked, covered in like fucking blood, in this sort of Elizabeth Bathory type of shit, Very vampiric, by the way. The doctor does come back after Justine gets out of the tomb and she's trying to fucking swipe, whatever. She's swiping at the fucking nun, butt ass naked, by the way. And the doctor starts throwing little splits of holy water on her. And eventually, Justine just goes in and she chomps a fucking chunk out of the nun's neck. But then with all the holy water dumped on her, Justine melts into a skeleton and dies. So, but from there, the doctor goes back to the convent because it's Alucarda's probably there, So they go back there. Alucarda appears with Daniela. And it appears to me that Alucarda was sort of trying to fulfill that third Vatican record, that was talked about in the past. Because this record talked about 3 people that, had some sort of affiliation with the devil, and they all died. They went crazy and died. And so, the 3, if that was to be re-fulfilled, would be Alucarda, Justine, and Daniela. But this, spoilers, doesn't happen exactly the same way. Alucarda, like I said, seems to have acquired the power to set people on fire by saying names of the devil, at least in this movie, which are interpreted to be Astaroth, Belial, and Beelzebub. Granted, if you were to formally read the Lesser Key of Solomon or what was that? Dictionnaire Infernal. Technically, these aren't the same demonic beings, but whatever. For the sake of a movie, it works, right? Granted, I don't understand why just saying the name would set the people on fire. Alucarda also seems to say something in what appears to be Latin, but I could not completely hear what it was. Also, just randomly, I want to point out I watched this movie on Fossum. And I had to cut on the subtitles for it. But the subtitles on Fossum were wrong half the time. And I was well, I guess I could hear most of what's going on, so that's good enough. Anyway, so the convent is set on fire by Alucarda's powers, and she's only able to be taken down when some of the sisters hold up one of, or perhaps the dying nun that I believe Justine must have bit. And they hold up this nun in the same position of Christ crucified on the cross. And at the same time, Alucarda just so happens to be in front of the big fucking cross that has Christ crucified on it. So from there, Alucarda freaks the fuck out. And I guess because she's sandwiched between two versions of like a crucifix, I guess, this scares her enough and she fades away into ash. She doesn't turn to a skeleton like Justine. She just fades away into the dirt. The doctor is seen holding his daughter, and we see the crucifix burning, and the movie ends. And nothing else is explained in the movie. But surprisingly, overall, I really liked this movie. Believe it or not, I really liked Alucarda. There are problems, sure, but I can definitely see myself rewatching this in the future. I would absolutely love to watch this movie with somebody else, you know, because it's kind of fun. It's kind of a fun movie. And it's one of those movies where the actual dialogue or concept doesn't delve as deep as you would hope, because it's also not a very long movie. But it's one of those movies that inspires you to be like, what if this happened? Or what if that happened? And it's like, if you're the writing type of person, this would inspire somebody to write like their own version of the film, you know, or their own story that's similar to it, you know. I will say, though, one of the main problems I had with the movie, of course, is that the audio isn't very great. And it was really hard for me to tell at times what the actors were saying on first listen. You know, I would have to replay some of the scenes just to even understand certain parts of the dialogue. It seems to me that the audio track was a little bit off, too. And sometimes, I mean, at first I nearly thought that the movie was dubbed over, but no, it was recorded in English. So I guess maybe it's just the way it was put together. Sometimes it just seems to me like the audio isn't completely synced. I also have to say that I think the movie could have done well to explain some background information about the characters. Nothing is really known about Justine other than the fact that she's an orphan. We don't have much reason to care about her, honestly. I mean, should I really give a fuck that she went into the devil? Not really. You know, I think that the movie could have taken the time to explore a bit more the idea of science versus religion more. The movie itself isn't very long. It's only an hour and 16 minutes. You know, another 15 minutes could have easily explained a few things more or given even more time to the development of Justine and Alucarda's relationship. The name of the main character is never even explained either. I mean, we know her name is Alucarda, and clearly this is a nod towards Dracula and Alucard. You know, Alucard backwards is Dracula. Backwards, Alucarda is a Dracula, which doesn't really make sense. But in the movie, her mother was named Lucy Westenra, who, of course, is a character, if you've read or listened to, in my experience, you know, Bram Stoker's book, Dracula. I found it funny, actually, that Alucarda's mother wanted her to be raised in a convent so that surely she would be a good person, despite the fact that she named her daughter fucking Dracula backwards. You know, it doesn't make sense. Where did Lucy get that fucking name from? How do you expect her to be raised in a convent and not be evil? Like, hello? I mean, it's on the same level in real life as people that name their fucking kids like Angel and Nevaeh. Like, the ones named Angel and Nevaeh are some of the most evil fucking children. I swear. You know? I think it must have been interesting, though. Or it would have been interesting to have had more nods in the movie towards Bram's literature, or maybe a scene talking about her name, but of course we never see anything about this. in general, I think this was more of a nod in general, to towards classic Gothic literature, because this movie apparently also has similarities with the story Carmilla, which is also about a female lesbian vampire. I've yet to read that story, but I've been meaning to. There seems to be relatively little known about the background of the production to itself. I'm not sure what the budget to the film was or what the filming session was really even like. There was like virtually no trivia about the movie when I looked it up on IMDb, and there's barely anything about it on Wikipedia either, actually. Not about the history about making the movie. And I'm the type of person that likes that kind of stuff. I do assume that the budget was like on the lower end, and I don't mean that in a mean way. It just, to me, I give them a lot of credit for working with what they had. Because when you think back on it, it's like they really didn't have that many different sets or different props. I think part of the reason why it wasn't this like huge, bloody, gory movie is because they probably couldn't afford to have a bunch of props of blood and body parts and this and that. The few settings in the movie are really worked to drive the dark, creepy feeling that you get from Alucarda. One of the best parts of the film to me is actually how weird they depict the character herself. I think they did a really good job at driving home that Alucarda was different. Alucarda is played by Tina Romero, as I believe I said earlier, who she really has this like sissy Spacek type of vibe with her crazy expressions. I mean, I don't even think the actress had any makeup on. If she did, it was very, very little. And having like next to no makeup really emphasized how fucking crazy Alucarda's eyes could look at times. I mean, I was like, yo, she looks nuts, Tina Romero really brought the character to life, especially with when she would do her crazy twirls and start screaming for Satan on top of her damn near psychotic eyes. I think that there is surprisingly a lot of screaming in this film that I didn't anticipate. When I went through the newspaper archives, I tried to look up any reviews for the movie, but I didn't see anything. I never saw a formal review in the, what is it, right now, 2026, so 49 years that this movie has been out. Never saw any review in the newspaper archives for it. The most we ever got on the film were ads about it being played in theaters, ironically, about 30 years after it came out. So I don't know what happened, but when I looked through the newspaper archives, once 2000 hit, you start to see more mentions of Alucarda, because I kid you not, looking through the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was next to nothing. Like, I think in the 90s, there was like one mention in a crossword puzzle. And then like 1995, there was this kind of like, not actress, but wannabe artist lady who used the name Alucarda. And then after 95, she disappeared. But no mentions of the movie are like ever made, ever. And then somehow within the 21st century, I think it's just because of how our culture developed and how the internet has made certain movies into very, very huge cult hits, Alucarda starts being mentioned in newspapers more. Now, never saw a review, but there were mentions of the movie being played in theaters. And as recently as 2024, there was a mention of some theater playing Alucarda, for a special showing. So it's very interesting how in the 70s, the movie wasn't really talked about, but in the decades since, it gained a cult following, and it's been shown, live in person, which I think is really cool. And kind of a side note, just a great part of the internet as a whole, how we can bring things back that never give attention to things that never got a chance to get the proper attention. So, despite the lack of story in some parts, I actually really like this film. Surprisingly, I really like Alucarda. And you might not understand why, but I give this a 4 out of a 5. 4 out of 5. I really actually like this movie. The only reason why it's not like 5 out of 5 is because, like I said, there's certain things that aren't completely explained, and sometimes the audio is not the best. So it's a little hard for me to follow naturally, or was when I first watched it. But overall, especially with people that are into like the kind of horror, I'll say religious horror. That's probably a better way to put it, because if you like shit like The Exorcist or even just exorcism type movies, I think you would like Alucarda because it kind of touches it's in that same field, It's not the same as Dawn of the Dead. It's not like, and it's definitely not Satan's Children because Alucarda is actually good. I genuinely think that this is a good movie that would be enjoyed by many people, And that's it. That's the review.